Guys, is Russia's purported offensive in the south just tactically such a bad idea that it must surely be fake? Well, I actually think no, this might be real. And we're going to break down why Russia would choose to do something so tactically unsound. I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. It's January 25th, 2023. This is your daily Ukraine update. Let's get into it. Okay, when we look at the control map, we can see that control has changed in two significant places. First is south of Pidhorod, a little north of Pidhorodne, a little south of Krasnohora. Russian forces have made some advances across this no man's land over the Bakhmutka, and is created a salient surrounding this urban area, developed area here. Again, it seems like Ukraine is not really engaging in any counter actions, counter attacks in Bakhmut at this time. So I actually don't expect to see this salient get pushed back. I think they are engaging in a systematic retreat from some of these areas, but they may also be cognizant of the fact that this road should actually be defended, and they need to probably try to keep it somewhat passable because it's going to become tighter and tighter to move forces in and around Bakhmut, Krasnohora. You can see once this string of villages is taken, it's going to be a lot of open terrain, and Ukraine's not going to want to have to form a defensive line on this open terrain. But the other advance that I think is more significant is actually to the south. And let's see if we can find it down here. It's right here near Vuhledar. And Vuhledar is interesting for a couple of reasons. First, as we talked about, Russia has been actually open that it's going to start trying to engage more offensive operations in Zaporizhzhia Oblast. That is, of course, within the Vuhledar region. Though previously we saw some attacks taking place here near this reservoir, but it looks like any territory that's been exchanged is fairly small in scale. But what's interesting is this small effort to seize these village of Mykilsky or slightly expand outward from Mykilsky and at least make Vuhledar contested. You might remember that the Russian Ministry of Defense received a ton of criticism in Pavlivka, and this was because they expended a tremendous amount of men and material. One of their active duty naval units, so sort of like their version of the Marines, took just eye-watering numbers of casualties to seize this town, Pavlivka. And when you can see in the grand scheme of things, it's not really that significant. It's it has one road leading to Vuhledar, but none of these are connected to really any significant urban centers. It's not tactically all that significant. Vuhledar supposedly occupies some heights slightly above the low ground here. And when you're reading a map, you can almost be certain that water pools in the lowest ground areas. So if you're curious, is Vuhledar above or below Pavlivka, we can infer that because Pavlivka is adjacent to this water, these significant numbers of reservoirs, it's probably the lower ground. But again, I guess you could also just go onto Google Map and take a look, the elevation. But these are the techniques you need to know for when GPS no longer works for some reason. But you guys can see here as well, when we look at Vuhledar, here's what I think is so interesting, right? Even though this is actually a low value area, when we go over to, let's see here, one of a sort of summarized news source about, this is from Ukrainska Pravda. And it talks about Shoigu, this is the Russian Minister of Defense, deploying his private military company in the war in Ukraine. And here's what's interesting. Again, about a month ago, they said that his PMC, the Patriot PMC, is sort of appeared out of nowhere, and they are augmenting the Russian Ministry of Defense, ostensibly, in the area of the Volhedar front. This is really interesting because, one, obviously it's the site of one of the places where really the Russian mill bloggers at the time were largely pro-Russian, or were pretty pro-Russian, and somewhat muted in their criticisms. But the disaster in Pavlivka really galvanized the Russian mill blogger space to become more openly critical of the way the Ministry of Defense was running the war in Russia. So it would make sense then that the Minister of Defense, if he has his own PMC, which I suspect is probably just a regular Russian military unit redesignated as a PMC, partially to, I think, divert some of the positive press that Prigozhin has been getting and his Wagner group, because undeniably, Prigozhin has been beating his own horn about the success in Bakhmut, limited though it may be, and at a tremendous cost. It still is undeniably actual success, which is something that has eluded the Russian Minister of Defense. And so, as Prigozhin has been growing in clout, I suspect that Shoigu and the Ministry of Defense is actually also going to, stand up their own PMC, deploy them in this region where the Russian Ministry of Defense has been humiliated, and they are going to sort of try to undo the damage by having their PMC achieve success, right? And prove that the Wagner Group is nothing special, that it's not about Prigozhin. It's that just any of these PMCs can achieve comparable battlefield effects. But what would that mean? That would mean, of course, that they actually have to, achieve those battlefield effects. And they appear to have fully seized Mykilsky. Obviously, this lists Pavlivka under Russian Ministry of Defense control. And so what they would need to do now to demonstrate some sort of effectiveness and more completely embarrass, or at least appear to compete with the Wagner Group in terms of positive press, they need to take Volhedar. So all that means to me is that because this is Shoigu's baby, this is his Patriot PMC, where they are operating, they are going to have an extra political reason to really take Volhedar. Now, as we've talked about, tactically, this doesn't make a lot of sense. You guys can see that there are many more, much larger towns situated along the Donetsk front, Lysychansk, right, Severodonetsk, Bakhmut, Seversk. There's just so many more. Obviously, Donetsk itself, Pivichny. There's so many more urban targets along the Donetsk area in the east of Divka. And when you look at Zaporizhzhia, you see a lot of just open ground, lots of scattered small villages, minimal tactical value. And so why the Russian MOD would choose to divert its combat power from where it's enjoying finally some success, i.e. Bakhmut, and reallocate it not to Donetsk, where there's been ongoing fighting without success, but create a third axis of advance at Volhedar, is again making the same mistake that they made at the initial invasion, which is spreading their forces out into three big axes when they didn't have the capability logistically or militarily to sustain that. They're going to do the same thing. And this is a natural outgrowth of the inability for the Russian armed forces to act and operate as a single political actor. Wagner Group is going to do whatever the hell they want. The Ministry of Defense is going to do whatever it wants. The Kadriovitsky, the Chechen fighters, they're going to apparently do whatever they want. The DNR, LNR are operating their own war, basically. All this to say, and now you have Shoigu and his Patriot PMC, which may or may not answer directly to the Russian Ministry of Defense chain of command. all of this is just further complicating things and dividing Russian combat power in a way that Ukraine just doesn't have to deal with quite as much. Again, that's why I'm somewhat, I believe that it's more credible, the thesis that Ukraine is actually systematically withdrawing from Bakhmut in order to divert its troops to get trained up on things like the Bradleys and the Leopards that more and more countries are providing. Now that Poland has pushed Germany to provide these main battle tanks, we see Poland is agreeing to. Apparently, there's rumors that Germany is going to authorize their Leopard 2s. And once other NATO countries have done so, it sounds like, if the rumors are to be believed, that the U.S. may actually be leaning towards providing Abrams tanks to Ukraine, which would be huge because the U.S., one, has a huge surplus of Abrams in its inventories, and two, the Abrams is a really, really effective, though very heavy, main battle tank. And so in regions where, again, like Zaporizhzhia, where there is not a lot of big rivers that require crossing or fording, not a lot of bridges to stop an offensive, this is actually the region where a mechanized assault would be really effective. So something to just think about for later. Anyway, guys, that is all I had for you for today. Certainly a lot of updates, a lot of speculation. If you guys want access to my breakdowns of the uncensored combat videos, the kind that YouTube won't let me show you, that's on the Patreon. First off, of course, I look at the viral combat videos from things like Reddit and the other sources where you get videos that YouTube just will not allow on their platform, POV, helmet cam footage, that sort of thing. I also take all the videos that for whatever reason I think YouTube should allow on their platform, but they still tell me they won't. I've started putting those on the Patreon as well. So whenever I have a video that YouTube says that I was a naughty creator, I just take those right off and I just put them on the Patreon. So even more reason to support the channel, and check out the link in the description. And of course, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Cheers.